Hi, this is Ashio, and this is going to be the top 10 manga that were published in English in 1989. It's been a long time since I did the 1988 video, and I thought to myself, if I can do one of these videos at least every 11 months, eventually I'll catch up. It's not happening. And I've been staring at these books for quite a long time, so I read some over a year ago in preparation for the video, and then it kind of fell to the wayside, but I'm going to try and make it work. I'm slightly to the point where I'm starting to resent some of the stuff on this list, and so this video is not going to be very good. So over time, hopefully I can make more of these videos, and over time we'll start to get to like just the cream of the crop, the really nice stuff. But we're in 1989. You still have a little bit of a struggle trying to find the best stuff. Basically, the stuff I've got, as far as I can tell, is essentially everything that was published in that year in English. So this is going to be interesting. If any of these aren't really your thing, remember that 1988's titles are still being published in single issues. You're still getting Nausicaa, you're still getting like Akira, Appleseed. They're all still coming out in single monthly issues. So there's a bit of like blurring in as to what title came out in what year. Don't be too strict with the timeline of it. We're just getting like overall trends and yeah, that kind of thing. So I don't want to repeat anything, which is why I'm not going to have Appleseed on here again. I'm not going to have a lot of these older, probably arguably better manga. It's been a struggle. So first up, I'm sorry, I'm not in a super good mood, so I'm just going to be a little bit more salty and just deliver some really half-assed reviews. It's all fine. It's all for the entertainment, and if anything what I say kind of piques your interest, you're more than welcome to check things out yourself and make your own mind up. I'm just one person with a microphone, and anybody can do that. Alright, first up we have got Bao, and I didn't like it, you know, to the point where I barely remember what it's about. I tried my best, I read it, and it's so typical, it's so generic, even for the time. It's a curiosity for sure. If you know JoJo's Bizarre Adventure, this is the same artist, the same creator. So if you want to see what he was up to before JoJo's Bizarre Adventure, this is probably worth your time, probably worth checking out. So it starts with a girl who's been kidnapped, and she's being transported on this train by bad guys, you know, generic bad guys. And they want to take over the world, this kind of thing. Probably. I can't remember, whatever. And she's got psychic powers, which is why they've got interest in her. Also on this train is a guy who's like in cryogenic suspension. He escapes, and it turns out he's got powers. This is Bao. And that's basically it. They're going to escape. Bad guys are chasing them. There'll be like a different person every other chapter who'll fight them off. And I don't care. Yeah. Bad review. That's on me. I'm very sorry. But I'm not in the mood. But it is true, if you're like a big fan of JoJo's Bizarre Adventure, it's only 2 volumes. So it's not long, which is another bit of a red flag. You know, this was in Shonen Jump back in the day, and anything that doesn't last very long in Shonen Jump, you kind of get a bit of a vibe off it as to why it might not have lasted. It didn't really have that enduring quality or appeal. But I don't see why Viz Media can't turn around, just do one you know, deluxe like hardback thing, you know, much like you know, this kind of thing. Just one of those books. You could get all of Bao, and you can see that it's kind of like, you can see how it's fed into JoJo. And honestly, probably a bit of a hot take, I think most people would probably agree that early JoJo's Bizarre Adventure isn't as strong as what came later. So if you think of what happened before that, might give you a bit of an idea of why I struggled with Bao so much. I couldn't even finish it. I got to volume 2 and I'm just like, honestly, I can't be bothered, and that was it. Sorry, worst review I ever done. They're going to continue. They're all going to be terrible reviews. It's one of these ones. I've been wanting to make this video for so long that I've grown to resent it. So if I can just like push this out and then I can start afresh with 1990. But honestly, between now and about 2000, these videos are going to throw some manga at me that I don't particularly want to talk about. I don't get a lot of energy speaking negatively of manga. That's not really my vibe and how I want to, you know, talk about manga. I want to encourage people to check out new things and like be excited and see what different things are out there. I don't really want to trash manga that wasn't really for me. There's going to be fans of Bao out there, And honestly, I'd probably rather watch the anime because it's kind of schlocky, kind of violent, and kind of stupid. But the manga itself, it's so painfully generic. I just couldn't get into it. Alright, next up. What's the opposite of generic? Just like plain weird. Okay, we got Cyber 7. It's one of the... It only ever came out in single issues. It never made it to graphic novel format. And published by Eclipse alongside Studio Proteus. And yeah, so they did work together on like Appleseed and a couple of these early manga before Dark Horse took the reins. Cyber 7 got left in the dust, and it's an odd one. It's about a guy who kind of like leaks a weird photo to the press, and because this story is published, the bad guys kind of come after him. It's another one of these scenarios where bad guys don't want to be seen as doing bad things, so they come after him, and it's a mess. All the best intentions came into this manga. It's got a bit of everything. Is it a fantasy? Is it a science fiction? Is it a comedy? Is it serious? Is it like a conspiracy theory? It's all of these things. And if it's all of these things, it can't do any of these things properly. The art style was really cool, and you can kind of see why it got picked up. If Akira was the really cool thing at the time, being published in English, and getting all this new attention into like manga, it's still a bit of the new kid on the block. It's only been around for a couple of years in like proper mainstream in the comic shops and that. And on a superficial level, you can see like the detail in the backgrounds and how the characters are portrayed is very much like a European comic influence going on there, much like there is with Katsuhiro Otomo in like Akira. So the bad guys come after our heroes because they've got photos of these like weird Cyber 7 people that you don't really actually see until about issue 3, because of the way the issues chop up what I imagine would be one chapter in the original Japanese release. So like you'll get like a conversation cut between issues. It's so odd. The timing and the pacing reading of it, it's okay. But like 1 minute you're doing one thing and it's like, oh, the girl who they're trying to escape from, she's actually a princess and her brother is actually her father's clone, and it's just so weird. It's just a mess of stuff, and it's perfectly readable, but it's like, what's going on? What's the end game of this? And then they get transported to like a second world. They get sent off to like Rockland or something like this. I haven't read the second series yet, but it's just a bunch of nonsense basically. There's not a lot of rhyme or reason. It's just like weird stuff going on constantly, sort of for the sake of it. You don't really get attached to any particular characters. They're kind of like selfish, self-absorbed, not a lot in common. They're kind of like not characters you particularly root for. You're just like observing them and seeing what's happening to them, not because you particularly identify with what they're up to, because yeah, they're just like not very nice people. I don't know. It's weird. I mean, here's like issue 2. It's got like Rabbit Man, who's like not quite the bad guy. He's like the crony of the ultimate bad guy. He's in a different dimension, who's not actually a bad guy. He's kind of like the Minister of Defense who's hiding in a robot, but he's like lying. He's not actually leading the people, and it's just too much. You know, sometimes less is more, but the approach of more is more. It kind of drags it down, and I don't know. It's a curiosity for sure, and I'm glad I read it. But it's another one of these. I kind of read it a couple of months ago. I'm just like, okay, sure. And it just completely left my mind. And just before making this video, I had another look in, and just to remind myself, and I'm like, it's just weird. Yeah, again, worst reviews ever. Worst reviews ever. This is a video I'm doing sheer bloody mindedness, not because of the quality. It's just, I want to get it done. I want to show you this stuff, that it actually existed, because no one talks about some of these titles anymore. Some of it's with good reason. And hopefully over time we'll get to some better stuff. What is next? What have we got? Oh, this was a thing I didn't even realise existed until quite recently. I wasn't even looking for it. I was reading an article and it was just casually dropped, and I'm like, what? No one's told me this before. Alright, so next we have got AD Police, and I'm not talking about the AD Police manga that you're familiar with, the Tony Takizaki one that came out in about 1992, 93, that kind of period. It's still Tony Takizaki, but he did AD Police 2500? I think that's how you say the title. This is a Japanese published bilingual manga, and he has made an anthology, official anthology of AD Police, which includes cameos from Bubblegum Crisis. So in case you're not familiar with the franchise, Bubblegum Crisis is a really popular anime in the 80s. Really cool music, cool vibe, like cyberpunk kind of stuff. AD Police was kind of like a spin-off, set in the same world, but focused on the police force within that cyber world. And you've got like, they're called boomers, but they're like robots that can mutate. They're kind of like squishy and gross, and they can kind of explode and bleed. So the AD Police anime is a lot darker, and this manga was kind of made alongside that. The anime is referenced to a couple of times, like in this, but every chapter is a little bit different. Some are like serious. A couple of stories are kind of like parody. One chapter is done in like Western like newspaper strip style, and it's just an odd little thing. And the artist also did an anthology on Neon Genesis Evangelion more recently, and if you've read that one, you'll know it's fun. It's the same kind of like quirky vibe, but he's also an excellent artist. So it's a bit of a weird mix. Some chapters work better than others because every chapter has a different kind of tone. It's an interesting oddity if you're like a Bubblegum Crisis fan, and there was never like an official proper manga of Bubblegum Crisis. There was the Adam Warren Grand Mal, one that was published in America, but in terms of like Japanese content, contemporary stuff to Bubblegum Crisis, it's kind of few and far between in the manga areas. So this is really interesting, and I'm glad I picked it up. I'm glad I came across it, because I didn't know it existed till quite recently. But yeah, it's an interesting one. Alright, next. What is next? I have got... This is Dominion, or you might know it as Dominion Tank Police. So this is Shiro Masamune again. I've already spoken a little bit about Appleseed in the past, and he's quite consistent with how he likes to do his manga. He has these big ideas about society and what it can and can't do. So in that respect, Dominion's kind of similar, but it's more of a comedy. It's like Appleseed, but literally everybody in it kind of doesn't give a shit. And everyone's a little bit, who cares? I just want to blow something up. So as an entertainment, it's actually a lot more fun than Appleseed, whereas Appleseed's a bit more of like a serious work. And it is about a tank police. So it's like set in the future, everything is polluted, everybody has to wear masks, which, wow, let's not get into that too much. And it's kind of like interesting where it can draw parallels into how things will evolve in the future. So Appleseed has like arguments about what's the role of the police in like an ideal society, that kind of thing. Whereas Dominion's kind of like, can I blow that up? And there's some boobs over there. Oh, pollution's bad, by the way. You know, it isn't deep or meaningful, but it is. Shiro Masamune is just having more fun making stuff, which kind of makes me happy. I like to see creators having fun with their work. But honestly, if you want like a super coherent thing as to what's going on, watch the anime, because it's a bit muddled, and much like Appleseed is. So if you watch the anime, it's kind of diluted and makes it a little bit more standardized. Like what am I trying to say? It's a more standardized narrative structure in which you're used to, as opposed to kind of jumping around assuming that you're on the same wavelengths as like the creator. But yeah, it's fine, it's good, and you'll have a bit of a laugh with it. Oh, my legs are going dead. I'm just sitting on the floor here. This is not comfortable. I'm never going to sit down here again for a video until I do it. Let's hope not. Anyway, next up, Godzilla. And bear in mind that virtually, apart from two, the AD Police one and one that's coming up, everything else on this list was released by chapter monthly in 32-page, issues. You had to go to the comic shop every month, or every 2 weeks in some instances, and that was the only way to read this stuff. These compilations and graphic novels and books that came out later are after the fact, which always bear that in mind. It's not just easy. You don't just walk in, grab volume 2, walk out, and you've got like 200 pages. You had to go 20, 30 pages at a time. It's kind of like trying to standardize manga into an established comic industry and how they used to consume their comics. The idea of doing that over here now is kind of like, no one would take to it. But then that was the standard. So always bear that in mind on how this stuff is coming out. But Godzilla, it's Godzilla. So this is one that's based on the 80s, the revival one. Wasn't it 1984? Was that the one that came out? So I'm going to stick with that. So Godzilla 1984 movie came out, and this is the manga that goes alongside it. And honestly, it's fine. If you like Godzilla, you're going to be satisfied with what you get. It's... I'm the kind of person, I'm a bit of a Neanderthal when it comes to Godzilla stuff. I just want to see Godzilla. I don't care about the humans. I don't care about their issues. I don't care about their plights. I want to see monsters smashing buildings and monsters smashing monsters. I'm that kind of person. And I'm bad, and I'm definitely missing a lot of the points. That makes me a bit of a poor judge on the quality of this one, but honestly, it sort of won me over. I started reading it, and I'm seeing all these regular people doing their regular human things, getting attacked by monsters and stuff, as you do, and it was okay. And then Godzilla showed up, cool stuff. Godzilla does what Godzilla does best. But as it went on, it kind of had that Godzilla movie vibe, which I was sort of impressed with. So I kind of went in with bad faith. So my fault on that. But as we got into it, it kind of won me over. It definitely succeeds in giving you that Godzilla vibe. And you'll definitely kind of come out of it. It's complete in one volume. It's just one story. You'll just get a decent Godzilla manga out of it. It does suffer, unfortunately, in the artwork states, because a lot of the manga, or virtually all of the manga, all of this manga, let's get this out of the way, on top of being published in like single issues, all of the manga is mirror flipped to go with left to right reading conventions. So we're used to reading right to left now, but everything was done left to right, and the artwork suffers under this. You know, the characters look a little bit skewed, and because the artwork looks a little bit shoddy, it suffers in that process. It kind of makes it a little bit more difficult to get into it. Thankfully, it's okay, and when Godzilla shows up, everything is also fine. But it's okay. Kind of hard to get hold of. This wasn't cheap, and this is quite a busted copy. It's a bit of a mess, but it was okay. I'm glad I picked it up. And if you're a big Godzilla fan, I don't think you'll be that disappointed. It's fine. Next, I have got something else that I'm going to do a bad review of. This is the bad review special. This is the bad review special video. This is Outlanders. And it's one of these manga where it has also suffered in the flipping of the left to the right. All the characters have a weird slant to them. It's not how the artwork was originally supposed to be viewed. So I have to give it a bit of a pass on that. And I've only read volume 1 so far, and it's got big volume 1 vibes, which doesn't mean I can judge it that fairly, because all it does is set up the main cast, set up like the principal's plot and where it's going to go, and that's it. That's all it does. You got a guy, he's like a photojournalist, and there's like an alien invasion, which is always good, and you got these like monsters showing up, and like a warrior princess from the alien race shows up. She's got a big sword chopping people up, and they kind of come across each other. He steals her sword, as you do, and she comes back for it, and they end up on some kind of fated quest to probably save the universe. Who knows? Japan gets destroyed, of course it does, and that's about it. It's all that really happens. And you got like spaceships that look like goldfish with giant eyeballs, which is kind of cool. And I think it's one of these manga that you had to have been there at the time to fully appreciate it, you know? Like, the artwork's fine, and the spaceships and all that are really, really, really nice. But the characters themselves do look dated, and I don't think they'd be looked at super appreciatively to like modern audiences. It's a bit of a shame, because there's a lot of manga coming out now that you know in 15 years time, 20 years time, no one's going to care about, because it's of its time, it's of its period. I'm worried that this is the fate that Outlanders has come to. The creator did quite well at the time. Quite a lot of his series were translated, and we're going to be checking those out in the future top 10 videos, I'm sure. So like a nice space opera, kind of a little bit shocky, not too bad. People getting chopped up and stuff like this, and it's kind of like a bit of fun. It's not super serious. It's got some comedic moments, and you're supposed to read it and enjoy it. It's just like pure entertainment. And I'm always in favour of manga that are just there for you. They just want you to have a good time and enjoy yourself. And I think I owe it to myself to check out more of this as well. But definitely a manga of its time. It never got another release where it could be flipped over. And that's the thing that Dark Horse really doesn't do. A lot of their legacy titles, they don't flip them. Why not, guys? Remaster this stuff and find new audiences. Don't just rely on the nostalgia. That's my preachy for the day. Okay, this is kind of a 2-in-1. It's a bit of a cheat. So is this the top 10, or is this just like a general thing? you can decide. Okay, so I don't even know what order to do this in. Okay, we've got Runic World here, but these were published individually, the two manga that are in here. We've got Laughing Target and we got Fire Tripper, and from this point on, we're really going to struggle. Not just with this one, everything else I'm going to mention now, because I've got huge nostalgic vibes for everything else that's coming up, more or less, and that affects my perception and how good I think it is. Admittedly, I hadn't actually read this before. My nostalgia is associated with the anime. Fire Tripper is one of my favourites, and Laughing Target is quite an effective horror. I would say that Fire Tripper is the better of the two. So we'll start with Laughing Target. It's about what should we start with? What perspective? We'll start with the guy. So the guy is just a regular guy. He's got a girlfriend in school, and then a girl shows up who is actually his betrothed from his childhood. His parents decided, oh, you guys are going to get married. And he's just like, okay, sure, I'm like 4 or 5, I don't care, I'll just say yes. But she's serious about it. And also, she's sort of possessed by maggot monsters. And she will destroy and kill anybody who gets in the way of her true love. And it's a bit cramped in the manga form. I hadn't read it before, and I'm so familiar with the anime. I'm used to like the steady, like the suspense as it builds up. But it's a bit more squashed and cramped, and it's a little bit more rushed. You don't really get to absorb that atmosphere as much as I would like. But it's cool. You can get it as a single issue. It's just a complete one-shot, like 40-odd pages. Or you can try and get the Runic World books. I do think that these are owed a reprint at some point. It's just a matter of time as Viz Media are going through Rumiko Takahashi's previous work. Alright, Fire Tripper is time travel. Some people would say it's kind of like a bit of an Inuyasha prototype. Sort of. Why not? It's about a girl in modern times, and she kind of gets blown up, as you do, but she comes into contact with fire. So when she hits the fire, she's the Fire Tripper. She ends up in like medieval times with like samurai and stuff like this, and they have a bit of an adventure. It's only 40 odd pages. You can't do too much in like a single short story. But with her bouncing into the past and also Back to the Future, she works out she can do as well. She kind of realizes who she is and where she wants to be. Does she want to stay in the modern world? Does she want to stay in the historical world where she's found like adventure and love and like probably a shorter life expectancy? But it's more fun. It's more of like a rounded, quite a neat little package, a little short story to get through. But yeah, it's cool. Rumiko Takahashi's stuff is always worth checking out. Sometimes her super longer stuff, you have to think a little bit more if you really want to invest. But something short like this, there's no real issue. It's kind of fun, and you'll get through it no problem. So this is a rare one. Good luck on eBay. It's all I can say until there's maybe a reprint. This is Hideshi Hino's Panorama of Hell, and also one of the first manga I've come across. Even though it looks like this, it looks like it's left to right, it's actually got one of these. This is the back of the book. So you actually start here. So you start at the back and read it like a manga as you would today, which is kind of a nice thing. I think this is one of the earliest instances of me seeing manga untouched, probably because it was cheaper just to translate it and leave the artwork as it is and not go through any other processes. But Panorama of Hell, Hideshi Hino, very, 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 as you can tell by the front cover, it's gross. And I think Hideshi Hino, if you keep an eye on it and you allow it to happen and you invest in his work, hopefully he's going to have a little bit of revival quite soon. His stuff is gross, there's no way around it. Junji Ito is always the go-to for a lot of people when it comes to horror manga. Hideshi Hino is a lot more grotesque because his work isn't as like, I don't want to say like realistic, because Junji Ito stuff isn't realistic, but his characters are like fully proportioned, this kind of thing. These are like cartoonish, horrible, disgusting, vile, everything you can imagine. But because it's so detached from reality in its depiction of its characters, it can go so much further. So it's about a guy who's an artist, and he wants to paint a panorama of hell, and he lives next to like the river of hell with bodies and bloated pigs and maggots floating through it, and there are like guillotines with heads being cut off, and he just goes through his family history, and he describes his environment and how he grew up. And it's the worst of instances. In every single time you'll get like violence, abuse. I don't even want to talk about some of it really. But if you can imagine something that's a little bit gross, like someone having their head chopped off, or vomiting up blood, but give it a good 2 pages. Really make the most of it, really splatter it. I think some people will be put off by just how far it's willing to go just to gross people out. But if you want to see a child hanging a dog, cutting it in half, and like dancing in its entrails, please don't be disappointed in me. But I liked it. I hadn't actually read it before, so I don't have any nostalgia. It's not one of these I've obsessed about for like 20 odd years, waiting for the opportunity to talk about it. I read it like 2 weeks ago, and I'm like, damn. If you want to like indulge in horror for the sake of horror, there isn't like a full coherent story. It's kind of like episodic. It's like, here is my father. My father was a complete dickhead. He had an awful fate. He did awful things during his life. On to the next person. This is, and that's how did they die? How did they suffer? What pain did they inflict on other people? And it just kind of like relishes how awful and gross it can be. So yeah, if you like that kind of horror, and you want to see like the grotesque cartoonishness that Hideshi Hino really specialises in, honestly, it's worth checking out. It's one of his better ones. Okay, we got 3 more left, and this is like a big nostalgia zone. I can't judge these ones fairly because they're all ones that I read fairly early on in my manga reading experiences. So I can't tell you. If I say it's good, it's probably because I'm super fond of it, and if someone else read it, they'd be like, what is this junk? So I'm sorry about this, but here we go anyway. These 3, I would say, put them all at number 1. I'm not going to say that one is better than the other. I'm just going to present them in a certain order. And people definitely wouldn't agree with the last one because they would say that is not number 1. Your number 2 should be your number 1. But I'm going to go with number 3, and we'll work our way up. We have got Fist of the North Star. The world has been destroyed, and there's no one in the world apart from biker gangs in like lots of leather, studded leather, this kind of thing, doing horrible things to innocent people. And there's a lone man who is walking around, the man of the 7 scars. And if you're doing bad things to innocent people, he's gonna mess you up. He's gonna break your arm, he's gonna make your head explode, he's gonna make your insides outsides, and do all those things that bad people sometimes deserve in a world where everyone is starving, no one has any water, and people just want to survive. It's the kind of manga it is. It's very simple in what it's trying to do. It's got great artwork. And like, if you look at Bao, that was right at the bottom of my list, they ran in the Shonen Jump at the same time. So if you looked at Fist of the North Star's artwork, and it's really accomplished and clean, and then you looked at Bao, which is kind of like, it's someone who's still developing their work, this wins out quite easily. It's still ridiculous, it's still violent, and it's still like really cliched and kind of cheesy. It's fun. But yeah, I can't give a true opinion on it because like I've got the original graphic novel release. I never got the single issues, but I did get this release, and this is falling apart. This is well loved. And also there was like, people have tried numerous times to release Fist of the North Star. Hopefully the new editions are actually going to complete the story. So this, what was this, the full colour version they tried to release? I think they went to about volume 9. They're really expensive now. I've only got the first one. I'm not going to get those because now we're getting the original one in these lovely hardbacks, much like JoJo's Bizarre Adventure. It's got like, it inserts the colour pages when it's needed. All the original artwork's intact, and it's fun if you just want to see silly beat up bad guys because they sometimes deserve it kind of manga. This is what you need. Next up is the manga that most people will probably put as number 1, but I'm awkward, so sorry. This is Yusei Yatsura. I need to get better at pronouncing it. Yurusei Yatsura, whatever. Glum. Rumiko Takahashi's breakout work that really put her on the map in Japan kind of thing. This is the thing that made her famous, and it was really, really successful. Only now are we finally getting the complete translated run. It was in the 1989. They did like the original set of stories, and they kind of jumped forward and did a bunch of other stories. And it's only now we get in the complete run, which is really, really nice. In these special 2-in-1 omnibus volumes. It's hard to talk about the story because it's... I don't want to say there isn't a story, but it's kind of like a sitcom, as it turns out. It has like a premise. And there's a guy... It's basically just a regular guy, but he's only failing that he's a complete horn dog and he's a bit of a ladies' man and he likes women. Otherwise, he's fairly standard and kind of normal guy. Aliens invade, as they do, and they say the only way we are not going to take over the world is if this guy, who's like the ladies' man, can win a game of tag. And so Lum shows up. She's like, let's play tag. He's like, you're half naked, let's do it. This is alright, the first chapter, just to set things up. So basically, the world doesn't end. The world is not invaded. He wins the game of tag. But that means that he now has associates with people from other planets. Eventually, someone will just show up. There'll be some weird stuff goes on. And by the end of the chapter, it will come to a resolution. And then in the next chapter, something new will come up. There'll be like a new monster or a new person. Some people will be recurring. Some people will just be one-offs. There isn't like an overbearing story. There isn't a beginning and a middle and an end. There isn't like an overarching plot. It's like the same characters in the same situations, but because they encounter each other in different combinations, different things happen each time. And some people are going to give me hate for that. They're going to say, oh, didn't you see in like chapter 200 they got a little bit closer? And I'm like, mate, seriously. I understand in something like Ranma the progression was so incremental that you barely noticed. It's the same kind of vibe. It's all about the everydayness of like being with your friends, being with your family, and kind of like experiencing these weird things that happen to these characters. It's just about hanging out with the characters that you kind of like hanging out with. Again, this is a video of bad reviews, so we're just gonna like accept everything I say is crap. But it's fun, and that's the main thing. It's good, it's fun. Over time, you might find it a little bit repetitive because there isn't that serialized element of like, say you're reading like Shonen Jump and you get a cliffhanger. There aren't really any cliffhangers. Every chapter's individual. That's kind of the point I'm trying to make. It's not like, oh, I just got to read another chapter because I want to know what happens next. You know what happens by the end of the chapter. It's all self-contained. Every single chapter's sort of self-contained. Maybe I need to read further and it suddenly develops into some big sprawling continuous epic. But I'm not sure. I'm not convinced it does because Ranma never did. And that went in like, 5-6 chapter chunks, sometimes just one chapter. But if you like that single chapter and you just want to visit your friends every now and then, all these characters that you're familiar with, you can just pop in, read a couple of chapters, come back to it later. You don't have to remember who did what because you know who these characters are by now. You can just move on each time. And it's good. It's good. I'm never saying it's bad. It's really high on this list. It's number 2. And yeah, that's it. Yusei Yatsura. I recommend it. Which brings us to my controversial number 1. And what's the point of any top 10 if it can't be controversial? We have gone for Crying Freeman. Oh man, where do I even start? Alright, so Crying Freeman has been published quite a lot of times. Viz Media published it in single issues. Then it published it again in like the graphic novels. Now it's, Dark Horse have got it now. I've got another edition here somewhere. I've got the UK edition, which as far as I can tell has one panel that is less censored than any other edition I've seen. So, which kind of gives you an idea of where this manga is going to take us. So the story is about a guy who's been kidnapped and brainwashed into being an assassin for a gangster syndicate. And it kind of starts off almost as a straight-laced, Yakuza crime gangster thriller kind of thing. But over time you start to realise that this is the weirdest shit you have ever read. So there's a woman, she's doing like art in the park and she witnesses a murder, and this is our man. And she knows that because she's witnessed the murder, she knows that he's going to come after her next kind of thing. So she kind of waits for him and she's like, I'm really depressed, there's nothing going on with my life. Maybe if the guy reads my diary and he'll agree to sleep with me, maybe I can have a happy end to my life. And I'm like, okay, it's a bit weird, I'll accept it, we'll move on. Also, the guy's Crying Freeman because he's been brainwashed into being an assassin himself. Every time he kills somebody, he sheds tears out of, not because he particularly cares about the people he's killed, but because it's his only rebellion he has against his brainwashing. It's the only way his body can respond. And also, people be naked all the time. Every gender, every body type. So over time everything works out and they do eventually get married, and they kind of have like an open relationship, you could say. But only one of them seems to benefit from this open relationship, and I know you can guess which one that is. So yeah, he gets to have his way with basically, I wouldn't say all of the women he meets, but at least 80%. There is one woman who kidnaps him because she is obsessed about him, and he refuses to go with her, you know. And did I mention this is weird? Then there's the whole thing where they have like their super gangster submarine. Their base is in a submarine, sure. Why not? Most people would have like an apartment complex or something. I don't know. And they seem to transport themselves around on hang gliders because sure, no problem. And then there's the side story where they make a bunch of guys pretend to be his clones, and so there's like 3 of him running around and he kills them. I don't know. And then there's some weird stuff that goes on. Like he goes to Africa and fights the local people over there, and it's like, this hasn't dated very well, has it? It's a mix of stuff, but over time you kind of get to realise that Kazuo Koike is like the writer, and like Lone Wolf and Cub, super famous, that kind of thing. But over time you do kind of realise, I think I just want to think that he's trying it on. He's trying to see how far can he push things before like an editor turns around and saying, wait, what are you doing? But no one ever told him. No one ever said stop doing it. And he just keeps going and going. So it starts off like a regular spy shit, you know, regular crime stuff. And by the end of it, it is so weird. He's like fighting wrestlers. He's hiding under fish at one point, and he just kind of comes up in a full white suit, super pose. Really cool. Straight face. Dead straight face. And I'm like, this has to be a comedy. Someone's having a joke here, and I don't know whether it's at my expense or not. Roll with it. It's doing these weird things just to shock and entertain. It's not doing it to upset people, hopefully. I don't know what the creator's intentions are. So it's super violent, super sexually charged, mostly offensive most of the time. There's always something odd going on that you don't quite agree with. But I don't know, like you watch like a horror film knowing the tropes and you knowing it's going to be like a mess of things, and you kind of read some older manga with a similar expectation. Like it's difficult to explain the appeal without coming across as being a complete dick. Crying Freeman, sorry, it's a guilty pleasure. I'm very, very sorry. But that is it. That is the top 10. It might have been 11. I lost track. Who counts? No one can count to 10. It's fine. But yeah, that's top 10 for 1989. Maybe there are 1 or 2 things, and I think Godzilla could technically have been in 1988's video. It's a bit of a grey, messy area, so I'll try not to miss too many in these early instances. Over time, hopefully, it will come to a point, because there's like, say there's like 30 manga released in a year, new titles, there will be manga that I don't have to talk about, and I can ignore the ones that I don't like as much, and I can focus on the good things. But for now, I had to check out Bao. I had to check out some other stuff I wasn't super keen on. Cyber 7, I'm sorry. You're interesting, but what are you doing? I hope you enjoyed this video, and I hope you enjoyed some of the manga that I've mentioned, or it's got your interest. Maybe you want to check them out. Maybe you'll find them secondhand or hidden away in a comic shop. Because some of these titles, just because they're old, doesn't mean they're rare. Or because people don't care about them, they're still sat in these shops after 30 odd years. So yeah, have a look around. Hopefully you'll find something that's of interest to you. And let me know. This is Usher signing off, and hopefully I will see you next time in 1990. Soon, hopefully. See ya, bye!